The dust-choked platform of Coloma's train depot was nearly deserted when Violet Winters stepped down from the railway car, her heart hammering against her ribs as she searched the scattered faces for the man she'd come 1,500 miles to marry. The late afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over the California mining town in June of 1878, turning the wooden planks beneath her worn boots into something resembling a skillet. Violet clutched her single carpetbag tighter, feeling the weight of every letter she'd exchanged with Harold Pemberton over the past 8 months pressing against her conscience. Those carefully penned words had painted pictures of a prosperous shopkeeper, seeking a refined wife to share his comfortable life in the golden hills of California. She'd believed every promise, every declaration, because believing had been easier than staying in Philadelphia with nothing but her late father's debts and her stepmother's cold disapproval. But Harold Pemberton was nowhere to be seen. Violet stood on that platform for 20 minutes, then 40, then a full hour as the sun began its descent toward the western ridges. The station master, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, eventually approached her with sympathy creasing his weathered face. "Miss, you waiting on someone particular?" he asked, his voice gravelly but kind. "Mr. Harold Pemberton," Violet said, hating how her voice wavered. "He was supposed to meet me. We have an arrangement." The station master's expression shifted to something uncomfortable. "Pemberton, you say?" "The fellow who ran the dry goods store." "Yes, that's him." "Miss, I hate to be the bearer of unwelcome news, but Harold Pemberton left town 3 weeks back. Took off in the night owing money to half the merchants on Main Street. Last I heard, he was spotted heading toward Sacramento, though some say he went south to Los Angeles." The words struck Violet like physical blows. Her vision swam, and she gripped the handle of her carpetbag so tightly her knuckles went white. "That cannot be right. He wrote to me just last month. He said he was counting the days until my arrival." "I'm real sorry, miss. Man was a snake oil salesman at heart, I reckon. You ain't the first person he's disappointed." The station master shifted his weight, looking deeply uncomfortable. "You got anywhere to go? Any funds to get you back home?" Home. The word tasted bitter. Violet had spent every cent she possessed on the train ticket west, believing she was traveling toward a new beginning. She had exactly $3.40 in her reticule, her father's pocket watch, and the clothes in her bag. Philadelphia wasn't home anymore, and California had just become a trap. "I'll manage," Violet said, though she had no idea how. "Thank you for your honesty." She walked away from the depot with her spine straight and her chin high, though inside she felt herself crumbling. The main street of Coloma stretched before her, a dusty ribbon lined with false-fronted buildings that had seen better days. The gold rush that had put this town on the map 30 years ago had long since faded, leaving behind a scrappy collection of miners, merchants, ranchers, and drifters trying to scratch out livings from unforgiving land. Violet had made it perhaps 50 yards when she realized she had nowhere to walk to. No destination. No plan. The enormity of her situation crashed over her like a cold wave, and she stopped in the middle of the street, momentarily paralyzed by panic and exhaustion. "Madam, you're standing in the road." The voice came from behind her, deep and touched with concern rather than irritation. Violet turned to find a man on horseback, a magnificent bay gelding that stamped impatiently at the delay. The rider himself cut an impressive figure, tall in the saddle with broad shoulders and a weather-beaten tan that spoke of countless days under the relentless sun. He wore dusty denim pants, a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a hat that had seen considerable wear. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a striking hazel that seemed to miss nothing as they studied her with frank curiosity. "I apologize," Violet said, stepping aside quickly. "I wasn't paying attention. The cowboy didn't ride on." Instead, he swung down from his horse with easy grace, keeping the reins loosely in one hand. Up close, Violet could see he was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that needed cutting and a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble. There was something solid about him, something steady that made her want to trust him even though she'd just learned the hard way about trusting strangers. "You look lost," he said simply. "And that bag tells me you just came in on the train. I'm Zachary Irving. Most folks call me Zach." "Violet Winters." She hesitated, then added, "And I am lost in more ways than one." Something in her voice or her expression must have conveyed her distress, because Zach's features softened with understanding. He glanced back toward the depot, then at the lengthening shadows, then back to her face. "Let me guess. Mail-order bride situation gone wrong." The accuracy of his assessment startled her into a brittle laugh. "Is it that obvious? Coloma's small enough that news travels fast." "I heard Pemberton skip town, though I didn't know he'd left someone in the lurch." Zach's mouth tightened with disapproval. "That's lower than snake's belly behavior, if you'll pardon my saying so. I wish someone had warned me about his character before I spent my last dollar traveling across the country." Violet knew she sounded bitter, but she was past caring. "Now I'm stranded in a town where I know absolutely no one, with no prospects and no way home." "So yes, Mr. Irving, things have gone rather spectacularly wrong." Zach was quiet for a moment, studying her with those perceptive hazel eyes. Then he said something that would change everything. "I think fate brought you here." Violet stared at him. "I beg your pardon." "Fate," Zach repeated, and despite the strange declaration, his voice was perfectly serious. "Hear me out before you think I've lost my mind. My ranch is about 8 miles outside of town. Been running it solo since my father passed 2 years back, and it's more work than one person can handle. I've been needing help, someone who can manage the house, help with the horses when needed, maybe handle the bookkeeping since my arithmetic isn't what it should be. The pay wouldn't be much at first, but it comes with room and board and it's honest work. You're offering me employment. You don't know anything about me. I know you came all this way to marry a man you'd never met, which tells me you've got courage. I know you're standing here holding yourself together when you've got every right to fall apart, which tells me you've got strength. And I know you need help, and I'm in a position to offer it." Zach shifted his weight, and Violet realized he was nervous despite his confident words. "Look, Miss Winters, I understand if you think this is improper or if you're worried about your reputation. We can have Doc Sullivan and his wife act as intermediaries if you want references for me. I can pay for a room at the boarding house for you tonight while you think it over. I'm not trying to take advantage of your situation. I'm just saying that maybe you ended up in Coloma for a reason, even if it wasn't the reason you expected." Violet's mind raced. Every practical instinct warned her against accepting help from a stranger, especially after Harold's betrayal. But what were her alternatives? She couldn't afford a train ticket home. She had no skills that would secure her immediate employment in a rough mining town. And winter would come eventually, and $3 wouldn't last until then. More than the practical considerations, though, something in Zach Irving's straightforward manner and honest eyes made her want to trust him. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe she was being naive again. But sometimes, when you were standing in the middle of a dusty California street with your entire world in a carpetbag, you had to take a leap of faith. "I can cook," Violet said. "I can clean, mend clothes, and I'm excellent with figures. My father was a bookkeeper before he died, and he taught me his trade." A slow smile spread across Zach's face, transforming his features from merely handsome to genuinely warm. "Then it sounds like we might have an arrangement, Miss Winters. What do you say we get you settled at the boarding house tonight, let you get some rest, and we can discuss details in the morning? I've got business in town anyway, so I'll be around." "That seems reasonable." Violet felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "And Mr. Irving, thank you. I don't know why you're being kind to a stranger, but I'm grateful. Call me Zach, and you're not a stranger anymore." He gathered his horse's reins and gestured down the street. "Come on. Martha Henley runs the boarding house. She's tough as boot leather but fair, and she makes the best biscuits in 3 counties." They walked down Main Street together, Zach leading his horse and matching his stride to Violet's shorter pace. The town was coming alive as the heat of the day faded, miners emerging from their claims, merchants sweeping the dust from their doorways, and children chasing each other between buildings with shrill laughter. Several people called greetings to Zach, eyeing Violet with open curiosity. She kept her head high, refusing to shrink under their scrutiny. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a sagging porch, but it looked clean enough. A handwritten sign in the window advertised rooms at 50 cents per night, with meals included. Zach pushed open the door and ushered Violet inside, where they found a compact woman in her 50s rolling out pie dough in the front parlor that doubled as a dining area. "Zach Irving, you haven't darkened my doorway in 6 months," the woman said without looking up from her work. "What brings you around?" "Need a room for Miss Winters here," Zach replied. "She just arrived in town and needs somewhere respectable to stay." Martha Henley finally looked up, her sharp eyes taking in Violet's travel-worn dress and weary face. "You're that mail-order bride Pemberton was supposed to meet, aren't you? Heard about that from Tom at the depot. Man's a scoundrel and a coward, running off like that." "Yes, madam," Violet said, too tired to be embarrassed. "I'm afraid that's me." "Well, you're better off without him." Man couldn't pay his bills on time and had wandering eyes besides. Martha wiped flour from her hands onto her apron. "I've got a room on the 2nd floor, clean sheets and a decent mattress. 50 cents includes breakfast and supper. You planning to stay long? Just tonight?" Zach interjected. "Miss Winters is going to come work at my ranch. She'll be heading out there tomorrow if she decides to accept my offer." Martha's eyebrows shot up and she gave Zach a long, measuring look. "Is that so? That's mighty forward of you, Zachary." "It's a business arrangement," Zach said firmly. "She needs work and I need help. Doc Sullivan can vouch for my character if Miss Winters requires it." "I'll vouch for him myself," Martha said, her expression softening slightly. "Zach's one of the good ones, Miss Winters. Works himself near to death on that ranch of his, honest as the day is long, and he's never been anything but respectful to everyone in this town. If he says it's a proper business arrangement, then that's what it is." "I appreciate your candor," Violet said. "Both of you." "Come on then, I'll show you your room." Martha led Violet up a narrow staircase to a small but tidy room with a single bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. "Supper's at 6. We're having stew and biscuits tonight." After Martha left, Violet sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day. She'd been awake since before dawn, spending the last leg of her journey pressed against a hard railway seat, rehearsing what she'd say to Harold when she finally met him face to face. All those imagined conversations were worthless now. Harold was gone, her plans were in ruins, and she was placing her faith in a cowboy she'd met less than an hour ago. Yet somehow, despite everything, Violet didn't feel hopeless. Zach Irving's words echoed in her mind. "I think fate brought you here." It was a strange thing to say, almost romantic in its implications, but there had been something in his tone that made her believe he meant it. She cleaned up as best she could with the water in the wash basin, changed into her only other dress, a serviceable gray cotton that had seen better days, and went downstairs for supper. The dining room was crowded with boarders, mostly men who worked claims or odd jobs in town. Violet ate her stew quietly, grateful for the food and trying to ignore the occasional curious glance thrown her way. Zach appeared just as she was finishing, his hair damp as though he'd washed up at the pump outside. He'd changed shirts to a cleaner one, she noticed, and he'd shaved away the stubble. The effect made him look younger, more approachable though no less imposing. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Please do." He settled into the chair across from her, accepting a bowl of stew from Martha with a grateful nod. For a few moments they ate in comfortable silence, the noise of the other diners providing a buffer against awkwardness. "Tell me about your ranch," Violet said finally. "If I'm considering working there, I should know what I'm walking into." Zach set down his spoon, considering his words. "It's called the Double I Ranch. My father bought the land back in '51 when there was still gold in the hills and he thought he'd strike it rich. He never found much gold, but he found he had a talent for raising horses, started breeding working animals, sturdy stock that could handle the terrain and the climate. By the time I was old enough to ride, we had 30 horses and a solid reputation. And now we've got about 40 horses, some cattle, and more work than I can handle alone. My father was the one who understood the business side of things. He knew which buyers to trust, how to negotiate prices, when to sell and when to hold back. I'm good with the animals and the land, but paperwork makes my head spin." He smiled ruefully. "Last year I nearly lost a major sale because I couldn't keep the contracts straight." "I could help with that," Violet said. "I've been keeping books since I was 14. My father said I had a head for numbers. That's exactly what I need. Someone who can make sense of invoices and accounts, who can write letters to buyers and keep track of what we're owed." Zach leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "I know this isn't what you planned, Miss Winters. You came here expecting to be a wife, to have a home of your own. All I can offer is hard work and fair pay. But the land is beautiful and the work is honest, and I give you my word I'll treat you with nothing but respect." Violet studied his face, searching for any hint of deception or hidden motives. She found none. Zach Irving looked like exactly what he claimed to be, a hard-working rancher in need of help, offering a lifeline to someone in desperate circumstances. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll come work for you." The smile that broke across Zach's face was genuine and relieved. "You won't regret this. I promise I'll make sure of that." They made arrangements to leave the following morning after breakfast. Zach would bring a wagon to transport Violet and her belongings, such as they were. He'd also speak to Doc Sullivan about the arrangement, making sure there was someone in town who knew where Violet was in case of emergency. Martha Henley offered to come visit after a week or so, ostensibly to bring some preserves but really to make sure everything was proper and above board. That night, lying in the boarding house bed and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a mining town settling in for the evening, Violet felt cautiously hopeful for the first time since stepping off that train. Her life hadn't gone according to plan, but maybe Zach was right. Maybe fate had brought her here for a reason she didn't yet understand. Morning came bright and clear, the California sun already promising another scorching day. Violet dressed carefully in her traveling clothes, packed her few belongings, and went down to breakfast with her stomach fluttering with nerves and anticipation. Zach was already there, demolishing a plate of eggs and bacon while chatting easily with Martha about the weather and the condition of the roads. He stood when Violet entered, that same easy smile crossing his face. "Morning, Miss Winters. Sleep well." "Well enough, considering everything." She accepted a plate from Martha and sat down. "I'm ready whenever you are. Wagon's out front. We'll head out after you've eaten." The ride to the Double I Ranch took them northeast out of Coloma, following a rutted road that climbed into foothills dotted with scrub oak and manzanita. The landscape was harsh but beautiful, all gold-brown grass and gray-green brush under an endless blue sky. Zach drove the wagon with practiced ease, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the area. "My father used to say this land was too stubborn to give up its gold, but too beautiful to abandon," Zach said as they crested a ridge. "I used to think that was just poetry, but the older I get, the more I understand what he meant." "It is beautiful," Violet agreed, shading her eyes against the glare. "It's so different from Philadelphia. Everything there was brick and cobblestone and crowds. Here you can see for miles. You miss it." "The city," Violet considered the question honestly. "I miss my father. He died 3 years ago and nothing felt right after that. My stepmother remarried quickly, and her new husband made it clear I was an inconvenience. So no, I don't miss Philadelphia. I miss what it was before my father died, but that place doesn't exist anymore." "I understand that," Zach said quietly. "After my father passed, the ranch felt empty for months, like the life had gone out of it. I've been trying to fill that emptiness with work, but some things you just can't fix with hard labor." They shared a look of mutual understanding. Two people who'd lost something precious and were trying to find their footing in the aftermath. It created an unexpected bond, a foundation of shared grief that made the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. The ranch came into view around mid-morning, a collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley with a creek running along the eastern boundary. The main house was a sturdy log structure with a covered porch and a stone chimney. Nearby stood a large barn, several corrals, and a few smaller outbuildings. Horses grazed in the nearest pasture, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. "Welcome to the Double I," Zach said, pride evident in his voice. "It's not fancy, but it's solid." "It's wonderful," Violet said, and she meant it. The ranch had a self-sufficient, enduring quality that appealed to something deep in her practical nature. Zach showed her inside the house, which was exactly what she'd expected from a bachelor rancher. The furniture was serviceable but worn. Dust lay thick on most surfaces, and the kitchen looked like it had been cleaned last sometime around Christmas. Papers were stacked haphazardly on a table near the fireplace, and she could see invoices and letters mixed together in chaotic piles. "I know it's a mess," Zach said apologetically. "I spend most of my time outside with the horses. Housekeeping hasn't been a priority." "That's what I'm here for," Violet said, rolling up her sleeves. "Show me where things are and I'll get started." Zach gave her a tour of the house. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs. He took the largest, his father had used the second, and the third was filled with storage. "That one's yours now," Zach said. "I'll clear out the boxes and get you a decent mattress. For tonight, my father's room is still set up. I haven't had the heart to pack away his things, but you're welcome to use it until I get yours ready. I don't want to intrude on your grief. You're not intruding, you're helping." Zach met her eyes steadily. "Honestly, Miss Winters, having someone else in this house, hearing another voice, knowing I'm not alone out here anymore, that's already more help than you know." Something in his words made Violet's heart squeeze with unexpected emotion. She'd been so focused on her own desperate situation that she hadn't fully considered what Zach's life must have been like, alone on this ranch, working himself to exhaustion with no one to talk to, no one to share meals with, no company except his horses and his memories. "Then I'm glad to be here," she said softly. "And Zach, you can call me Violet. Miss Winters feels too formal if we're going to be living under the same roof." His smile was warm and genuine. "Violet it is." They fell into a routine over the following days that felt surprisingly natural. Violet rose with the sun, started coffee and breakfast while Zach handled the morning feeding and watering. They ate together, discussing the day's tasks. Then Zach would head out to work with the horses while Violet tackled the housework and began the monumental task of organizing his records. The bookkeeping was in worse shape than she'd feared. Bills were unpaid not because Zach lacked money, but because he'd lost track of them. Invoices for sold horses were mixed with receipts for feed and equipment. She found 3 letters from potential buyers that had never been answered. Opportunities lost because Zach hadn't realized they needed responses. Violet created a system, sorting everything by date and category, setting up ledgers to track income and expenses. She wrote letters to the buyers who'd reached out, apologizing for the delay and asking if they were still interested. Within a week, she had a clear picture of the ranch's finances, and it was better than she'd expected. The double I was profitable, earning enough to support 2 people comfortably with money left over for improvements and expansion. "You've worked miracles," Zach said one evening as Violet showed him her organized ledgers. "I can actually understand what's happening with the money now." "You were making good decisions," Violet told him. "You just needed a better system for tracking them." They were sitting at the kitchen table after supper, the dishes washed and put away, the house settling into evening quiet. This had become Violet's favorite time of day, when the work was done, and they could simply talk. She'd learned that Zach had a dry sense of humor and a storyteller's gift for describing the quirks of his horses. He'd learned that she loved reading but had left all her books behind in Philadelphia, and that she could play the piano though there hadn't been one in her stepmother's house. "There's an old piano in town at the church," Zach said thoughtfully. "Next time we go in, you should play something." "I'm probably rusty after 3 years. Don't matter. I bet you're still better than anyone else in Coloma." These small moments of consideration, of Zach noticing what she liked and trying to provide it, were becoming dangerously important to Violet. She'd been at the ranch for only 2 weeks, but already she couldn't imagine leaving. The work was hard but satisfying. The land was harsh but beautiful. And Zach himself was becoming far more than just an employer. She watched him study the ledgers, his brow furrowed in concentration, lamplight catching the strands of bronze in his dark hair. He'd shaved that morning, and she could see the strong line of his jaw, the way his throat moved when he swallowed. Her fingers itched to reach out and touch him, to smooth the worry lines from his forehead, to trace the shape of his mouth. Violet caught herself and looked away, frightened by the intensity of her feelings. She couldn't afford to develop romantic notions about Zach Irving. He'd hired her out of kindness, given her a chance when she had nothing. Reading more into his gestures would be foolish and unfair to both of them, but her heart wasn't listening to her practical mind. Every morning when Zach smiled at her over breakfast, every evening when he thanked her for her work, every accidental brush of hands when they reached for the same thing, she felt something building inside her, warm and bright and terrifying. The summer rolled on, hot and dry. Violet learned the rhythms of ranch life, the cycle of feeding and training, the constant maintenance that kept everything running. She learned to recognize each horse by sight, their individual personalities and quirks. She helped Zach with the gentler animals, feeding treats and brushing coats while he worked on their training. "You have a gift with them," Zach observed one afternoon as Violet stood in a corral with a skittish mare, speaking softly and offering apple slices. "Daisy hasn't let anyone but me get close since we got her. She just needed patience," Violet said as the mare finally lipped an apple from her palm. "She was frightened, not mean. Most things are when you get down to it." Zach leaned on the fence rail, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Frightened of being hurt again, so they put up walls and keep people at a distance. Violet met his eyes, recognizing that he was talking about more than just horses. Sometimes the walls are necessary. Sometimes you need them to survive. And sometimes they just make you lonely. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Violet's heart pounded as she held his gaze, seeing her own confused feelings reflected back at her. Zach looked like he wanted to say more, but a shout from one of the far corrals broke the moment. A horse had gotten loose, and he had to run off to handle it. That night, Violet lay in bed and forced herself to confront the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Zach Irving. Not the desperate, grasping love she tried to convince herself she felt for Harold Pemberton through letters. This was different, built on shared days and honest conversations, on watching him work with his beloved horses and seeing the kindness in every action. This was real and deep and utterly terrifying, because she had no idea if Zach felt the same way. He was kind to her, yes, but he was kind to everyone. He enjoyed her company, but that might just be relief at having help and conversation after so long alone. Reading romance into a business arrangement would be the height of foolishness, and she'd been foolish enough for one lifetime. August brought a letter from one of the buyers Violet had contacted, a man named Robert Thornton who ran a freight company in Sacramento. He wanted to visit the ranch to see the horses in person and potentially make a significant purchase. It was exactly the kind of opportunity the double I needed, but it meant preparing for an important visitor. Violet threw herself into preparations, cleaning the house until it gleamed, baking bread and pies, making sure everything looked as professional as possible. Zach worked with the horses, selecting the strongest and best trained animals to show Thornton. "You don't have to go to all this trouble," Zach said as Violet fretted over the supper menu. "Yes, I do. First impressions matter in business. If he sees a well-run ranch with good record-keeping and quality animals, he'll pay fair prices and come back for future purchases." "You sound like you plan to stick around for those future purchases." Violet paused in her menu planning, realizing what she'd implied. "I suppose I do, unless you're planning to fire me." "Never." The conviction in Zach's voice made her look up. He was standing close, closer than usual, and the expression on his face was intense. "Violet, I need to tell you something," her breath caught. "What is it?" Before he could answer, they heard horses approaching. Thornton had arrived a day early, cutting short whatever Zach had been about to say. The moment shattered, and they both moved into their professional roles, greeting their visitor and showing him around the ranch. Robert Thornton was a shrewd businessman in his 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He examined the horses carefully, asked pointed questions about their training and temperament, and watched how they responded to Zach's commands. Violet brought out her ledgers, showing him the ranch's records and demonstrating the care that went into every aspect of the operation. "Impressive," Thornton said finally. "Your father ran a tight ship, Irving." "Actually, Miss Winters is responsible for the bookkeeping," Zach said. "I'm just the horseman." Thornton's eyebrows rose as he regarded Violet with new respect. "Is that so?" "You have a talent for organization, Miss Winters. These records are clearer than most businesses twice this size." "Thank you, sir. I believe good records are the foundation of good business." They negotiated over supper. Thornton testing Zach's resolve on prices, while Violet provided the financial information that backed up their asking amounts. By the time the evening ended, they'd agreed on a sale of 8 horses at premium prices, with the promise of future business if the animals performed as expected. After Thornton left the next morning, Zach swept Violet into an impromptu embrace, spinning her around the kitchen. "We did it. That sale will carry us through the winter with plenty to spare," Violet laughed, dizzy from the spinning and from the feeling of being in Zach's arms. When he set her down, they stood close together, his hands still on her waist, her palms resting against his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast, matching the rhythm of her own. "Violet," he said, his voice rough, "what I was trying to say yesterday before Thornton arrived. Yes, you've changed everything. This ranch, my life, it all makes sense again with you here. I know you came to California looking for a husband, and all I offered you was a job. But if you're willing, if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I'd like to offer you more than employment." Violet's heart soared even as her practical mind tried to catch up. "What are you saying, Zach?" "I'm saying I'm in love with you. I think I have been since the moment I saw you standing lost in the middle of that street, too proud to ask for help. I meant what I said that day. Fate brought you here to me, and I don't want to waste this chance." He cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. "Violet Winters, would you consider becoming my wife? For real this time, not through letters but through knowing each other, working together, building something that matters." Tears pricked Violet's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes. Yes, Zach, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, a sweet, tentative kiss that quickly deepened as weeks of restrained longing broke free. Violet wrapped her arms around his neck, pouring all her own feelings into that kiss, all the love and hope and gratitude she'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "I probably should have courted you properly first, brought you flowers, taken you to town socials, done this right. You did do it right. You gave me work when I needed it, respect when I'd been treated as disposable, and a home when I had nowhere to go. You've courted me with every kind word and shared meal and evening conversation. I don't need flowers, Zach, I just need you." They were married 3 weeks later in Coloma's small church, with Martha Henley crying happy tears and Doc Sullivan standing as Zach's best man. Half the town turned out, curious about the mail-order bride who'd ended up with one of their most eligible bachelors. Violet wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair that Zach had picked that morning. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared, and Zach kissed his bride with undisguised joy. The wedding reception was held at Martha's boarding house, with music and dancing and more food than 50 people could reasonably eat. Violet danced with her husband, with Doc Sullivan, with the station master who'd broken the news about Harold Pemberton all those weeks ago. "Worked out for the best, didn't it?" the old man said with a knowing wink. "That Pemberton fellow did you a favor, running off like he did." "He really did," Violet agreed, watching Zach laugh at something Martha was saying. "I thought my life was over when he didn't show up. Turns out it was just beginning. Life at the Double I settled into a new rhythm, one shaped by love and partnership." Violet continued managing the books and the household, but now she also worked side by side with Zach in the corrals, learning to train horses under his patient instruction. He taught her to ride properly, not side saddle like a city lady, but astride like someone who needed to cover ground. They expanded the ranch slowly but steadily, buying adjacent land when it became available, increasing their herd, building their reputation. Thornton became a regular customer, and his recommendations brought other buyers. Within 2 years, The Double I was one of the most successful horse ranches in the county, but the true measure of their success wasn't in profits or acreage. It was in the laughter that filled the house, in the way they moved around each other with unconscious familiarity, in the quiet evenings spent reading together or planning for the future. It was in the way Zach still looked at Violet like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him, and the way her heart still skipped when he smiled. They made mistakes, had arguments like any couple. Zach could be stubborn about his methods, reluctant to try new approaches even when Violet's suggestions made logical sense. Violet could be overly cautious, wanting to save every penny when sometimes investment was necessary for growth. But they learned to talk through their disagreements, to listen to each other's perspectives, to find compromises that honored both their viewpoints. In the spring of 1880, Violet discovered she was pregnant. She told Zach over breakfast, simply and directly, and watched his face transform with wonder. "We're going to have a baby," he breathed, coming around the table to kneel beside her chair. "Truly, truly. Doc Sullivan confirmed it yesterday." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "Our child, Zach, a family." He kissed her with infinite tenderness, and Violet saw tears tracking down his face. "My father would have loved this, would have loved you. Tell me about him," Violet said softly. "Tell me all the stories, everything you remember. I want to know him through you, and I want to tell our child about the grandfather who built this ranch." So Zach talked, sharing memories of his father while Violet listened and memorized every detail. It became one of many conversations that summer, weaving together their separate pasts into a shared history, creating the foundation for the future they were building. Their son was born in November, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. They named him Samuel, after Zach's father, and the entire household revolved around the tiny new life. Zach was a devoted father, walking the floor with Samuel during fussy nights, singing off key lullabies and staring at his son with besotted fascination. "I never knew I could love anything this much," he confessed to Violet one night as they watched their sleeping baby. "Except for you. Loving you taught me my heart could expand to hold this much feeling." Violet leaned against her husband's shoulder, content beyond measure. "Do you remember what you said the day we met? That fate brought me here. I remember. You were right. Everything that happened, Harold's betrayal, being stranded in Coloma, all of it led me exactly where I was supposed to be." She turned to kiss him softly. "Led me home to you." The years rolled on, marked by changing seasons and growing children. Samuel was joined by a daughter 2 years later, Emma, who had her mother's practical nature and her father's love of horses. Then came another son, Thomas, wild and adventurous, keeping his parents perpetually worried and perpetually entertained. The ranch grew along with the family. They built a larger barn, added more corrals, hired hands to help with the increased workload. But no matter how successful they became, Zach and Violet never lost sight of what mattered most. Every evening, no matter how busy the day had been, they made time to sit together and talk, maintaining the connection that had formed in those early days of unexpected partnership. They raised their children with the values that had built the Double I: honesty, hard work, kindness, and respect for the land and animals they depended on. Samuel grew into a skilled horseman like his father. Emma developed a head for business that rivaled her mother's, and Thomas found his calling in veterinary medicine, studying under Doc Sullivan before heading to San Francisco for formal training. Martha Henley remained a fixture in their lives, visiting regularly and spoiling the Irving children shamelessly. She loved to tell the story of how their parents met, embellishing it slightly more with each telling, until it became the stuff of local legend. The mail-order bride who was abandoned at the depot, the cowboy who saw her and knew fate had brought them together, the love story that proved sometimes the best things in life come from the worst disappointments. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Zach took Violet back to Coloma, to the exact spot in the street where they'd first met. The town had changed, growing more settled and civilized, but the depot still stood, and the memories were vivid. "Right here," Zach said, standing in the middle of the dusty road. "You were standing here with your carpetbag, looking lost and beautiful and so damned brave. I took one look at you and felt something shift inside me, like a door opening that I hadn't even known was closed. I thought you were just being kind to a stranger," Violet admitted. "I never imagined you felt anything beyond sympathy for my situation. It was never just sympathy. From that first moment, I wanted to know everything about you, wanted to make you smile, wanted to give you reasons to stay." He pulled her close, heedless of anyone who might be watching. "Best decision I ever made, offering you that job. Second best decision was convincing you to marry me." "What was the third best decision?" Violet asked, smiling up at him. "Every single morning for the past 20 years when I've woken up and chosen to love you all over again. That's not one decision, that's thousands, and every one of them was right." They kissed in the middle of Main Street. Two people who'd found each other through chance and choice, through desperation and hope, through all the strange workings of fate that had brought a stranded mail-order bride and a lonely cowboy together at exactly the right moment. The children eventually took over more of the ranch operations, allowing Zach and Violet to step back slightly, though neither ever fully retired. They couldn't imagine not being involved in the work they'd built together. Samuel married a teacher from Sacramento and brought her to live on the ranch, building a house nearby and starting the next generation of Irvings. Emma shocked everyone by falling in love with a traveling journalist and moving to Denver, though she stayed involved in the ranch's business decisions through regular correspondence. Thomas returned from his veterinary training and opened a practice in Coloma, serving the entire county and making his parents absurdly proud. Violet and Zach grew old together, their hair silvering, their hands growing lined and spotted, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had played, and remembered all the moments that had brought them to this peaceful completion. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if Harold Pemberton had shown up at that depot?" Zach asked one twilight evening, his hand clasped in hers. Violet didn't even have to think about it. "No, I can't imagine any other life but this one. Even if I could go back and change things, I wouldn't. Every step, even the painful ones, brought me here, brought me to you. I'm a lucky man, Violet Irving. We're both lucky. We got our happy ending, and it was true." Against all odds, through disappointment and chance encounters, through hard work and honest love, they'd built something beautiful and enduring. The Double I Ranch thrived into the new century, a legacy of two people who'd taken a leap of faith on a dusty afternoon and found everything they'd been searching for. Violet lived to see her great-grandchildren, to watch the ranch continue growing and evolving, to know that the home she and Zach had built would endure long after they were gone. And when she finally passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76, surrounded by family, it was with the satisfaction of a life fully lived and deeply loved. Zach followed her a year later, unable to bear being separated from his wife for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under an oak tree where they'd often sat together to watch the sunset. Their grandchildren planted wildflowers around the graves, the same kind Violet had worn in her hair on her wedding day. The story of how they met became family lore, passed down through generations of Irvings. The tale of the mail-order bride who was abandoned, the cowboy who believed in fate, and the love that grew from a chance encounter on a California street. It was a story about second chances and unexpected blessings, about being brave enough to trust again after betrayal, about recognizing love even when it arrives in unexpected packaging. Because sometimes the best things in life come not from careful planning, but from being open to possibility. Sometimes fate does intervene, bringing two lonely souls together at exactly the right moment. And sometimes, when you're standing lost in the middle of a dusty street with your world falling apart, the right person comes along and offers not just help, but hope, partnership, and a love that lasts a lifetime. The Double I Ranch still operates to this day, now run by the fifth generation of Irvings, a testament to the foundation Zach and Violet built together. And on the wall in the main house hangs a photograph from their wedding day, a young couple beaming at each other with unguarded joy, their whole future ahead of them, proof that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the words, "I think fate brought you here."